Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Talks at Google event. I am Madi Kirch, and I am a Wellbeing Program Manager on Google's Wellbeing and Mental Health team. Today, we are welcoming Mariana Alessandri to Talks at Google during Mental Health Month. Mariana will be discussing her new book, Night Vision, Seeing Ourselves Through Dark Moods. Mariana joins us as an Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, where she teaches existentialism, Latin American philosophy, religious studies, and the history of philosophy. Mariana's newly published book, Night Vision, shows us how when we learn to embrace the dark, we begin to see these moods and ourselves as honorable, dignified, and unmistakably human. Before we get started, just a quick reminder to our audience that's joining live that there will be a Q&A at the end of our discussions. So for those joining in live, you can feel free to put any questions that crop up in the chat on the right-hand side, and we'll have Mariana answer them at the end of the event. Without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce Mariana.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, Mariana. Welcome to Talks at Google. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be able to talk about my book and do the Q&A. It's really a lot of fun.
Likewise. I will also have some questions for you before we do the Q&A because there are so many parts of your book that resonated with me. But I wanted to kick things over to you and give you the chance to share lessons from your book, Night Vision, with our audience.
All right. So I'm going to do like a little 20-minute kind of spiel. And then that way I don't sort of forget what's in the book and that kind of thing. So my, tentative title is Feeling Better About Feeling Bad. But as you'll see, it's not going to be in the sort of usual way. So I love the self-help industry. I love the way that it empowers us. I love the way it says we can shape our future. I love it for many of the reasons that I love ancient philosophy. I love Aristotle's distinction between feelings and actions. He says, you can feel however you feel, but you better behave beautifully. I love the idea that we make our own happiness. I love not waiting for someone else to fix my problems. Some of you are like me, and we like to be told that we can be happy if we just change our attitude, not our surroundings, which is a quote from Seneca, ancient Roman Stoic. So this is all what I call the light metaphor. It sounds like this in today's day and age. Look on the bright side, shed light on the problem, find the light at the end of the tunnel, make your own light. I had a light bulb moment. Let your light shine. Step out of the dark and into the light. It's not a coincidence that we're obsessed with light. Plato's allegory of the cave tells the story of a prisoner who gets set free and dragged into the sunlight and eventually learns to know the truth. We call wise people enlightened because we equate light with knowledge, wisdom, goodness, purity, and happiness. Jesus was the light of the world. The light metaphor comes from all these sources and more, and they make us feel bright and sunny, right? But my best friend gets migraines. Every time she gets one, she feels like a failure. Why? Turns out the light metaphor has an underbelly. I call it the brokenness story, and it gets activated every time we fail to make our own sunshine. People who live with anger and sadness and grief, depression and anxiety, we often feel like something's wrong with us. Other people have shirts that say #NoBadDays. What's wrong with me? You see, it's two sides of the same coin. You have this is the light metaphor, choose happy. And while it's working, it feels good and it feels like we are actually choosing happy. And then when you're in the dark though, right? When you aren't happy, when you find yourself still unhappy, watch out. Because when we're feeling dark, people around us want to fill us with love and light. When we're in the cave of sorrow that exists inside all of us, people try to bring in their flashlights to look for ways to open the blinds and sometimes to bright side us into seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. If we're angry, someone might say, well, anger does you no good. It just makes things worse. If we're sad, people will say, at least you're still alive. At least you have legs, whatever it is. We might even try to lighten ourselves up by picking up a self-help book that promises to help us eliminate negative thinking. That was a title published in 2020. It's normal to crave light because that's where our dark moods look worst, like when you're trying on bathing suits in a dressing room with fluorescent lighting. Throughout history, we've associated darkness with negativity. Western philosophy and religion have conditioned us to want to be light instead of dark. And this has had some pretty bad racial connotations, with darker skin being equated with ignorance and danger. If light is good, dark is bad. If light is intelligent, dark is ignorant. If light is safe, dark is dangerous. Dark is ugly and gloomy and painful and heavy and monstrous and sinful. Darkness is vilified in our country, so it's hard to feel dark in a bright-sided world. It's hard to feel grief, anxiety, depression, anger, sadness, especially when we see that other people have beat their darkness. So here's some self-help authors that I find quite problematic. Mark Manson says in his 2016 book, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Gary Bishop says things like, I am not my thoughts, I am what I do, right? They're very empowering on an individual level, but you can see the kind of undercurrent. And Rachel Hollis says it out loud. She says it straight out. She says, if you're not happy, it's on you. So what I'm calling the underbelly is like the blame that goes with choose happy. The underbelly of choose happy is it's your problem if you're not happy. So the self-help improvement industry peddles a lie we love. No matter what circumstance I'm in, I can be happy. I just need to try harder. So if the premise is that we're supposed to stay positive, I wrote this book because I can't stay positive. So you can see here, I needed a visual for myself. This is the world that I live in. And you can ask yourself if this is the world that you live in too. I think of the world as a series of walls. Society just has messaging, right? And this is like literally posters at my airport. These are t-shirts. These are pillows and mugs and things that we actually like choose to put in our house. But I'm worried about it because we might not all get migraines, but here in this space, in this virtual space, we live with anxiety, depression, sadness, anger, and grief. And we live in a world that simultaneously says that we can be happy if we just really want to be. So if we spread our light, if we cheer up our neighbor, and if we choose happy. But I'm an existentialist. And for me, what that means is that a human being is someone who holds your hair while you vomit and holds your hand while you die. Like, I think we're just here and we live and we suffer and we see our people suffering. And it's not easy to live in a world where there's so much light being shed on us. And like, it's almost like we can't meet that expectation of the world. So what do you say to yourself when you get into a dark mood? I say that I'm wallowing or having a pity party or that I'm broken. It's not a coincidence that we call most dark moods by a bad name. Disorder, it's a mental illness, it's a dysfunction, deficiency, disease, pathology, infirmity, ailment, malady. We treat our dark moods like abnormalities. So the person who's in a dark cave, we call them broken or weak or selfish or self-indulgent. We used to call them sinners until we started to call them sick. Although social media is filled with bundt cakes and exotic vacations, it's also filled with hatred and injustice and violence. To be human is actually to be very dark, and seeking the light isn't working. So I don't know if I can make you feel better, but I think I know what's making you feel worse. The first goal of night vision is to help suffering people feel less like suffering is a bug and more like it's a feature of humanity. So it's feeling better about feeling bad. But a second goal of this book is to criticize our society, U.S. society, for selling us the idea that dark is bad and light is good. We got it from Plato, but it's reinforced on posters and pillows, and we carry fear of the dark inside of us. It comes from this ancient philosophers. So I do a lot of teaching of ancient philosophy and contemporary philosophy. But when I go back to the sources, this is who I think we're getting our education from. So ancient philosophy is in part to blame. As much as I love the Greek and Roman Stoics, just like I love self-help, it's also problematic for me to read and try to apply, because they also believe that we control our happiness. To begin with, we control our feelings, say the Stoics, because they're the same as our thoughts. Our judgments are what bothers us. Says Epictetus, it's not the thing that happened that bothers us, it's our judgment about the thing that bothers us, that makes us upset, and we can actually choose not to be upset. We can train ourselves to not be upset. Then the Aristotle, again, he said, don't worry about your feelings. It's okay if you get angry, just don't express it. Don't like lash out on people. The Epicureans, I think, add to the mix because they gave us this impression that happiness and sadness are opposites. They talk about increasing pleasure and decreasing pain as a sort of formula to living a good life. And I think that left us with the wrong impression about the way that pleasure and pain work. I find them most often that they're together. So all of these, if you hear any connotations from today's world, you're onto something. That's what I think. I think that modern Stoicism has been revived in cognitive behavioral therapy. I think that the Epicurean philosophy has been revived in positive psychology. And Aristotle's just here, right? There's a lot of people who love the idea of you don't need to control your feelings, but you should control your actions. So what would happen if instead of bringing our loved ones light when they're in a dark cave, what if we could just go in and sit with them in the darkness? What if we could sit in the dark with other people? I think that we'd begin to develop night vision to see dark moods in the dark. And I have philosophers who back me up on this. They each lived with a dark mood, but they called it by different names. They all learned to see the moods and themselves in the dark, and they stopped looking so ugly. So as it turns out, we look better under candlelight than under the fluorescent lighting. So I'll do each chapter, what anger or what the mood looks like. These are 5 chapters. What the mood looks like in the light, and then what the mood looks like in the dark. And you'll see that from my point of view, my theory is that these things just look much better when we dim the lights. The ancient Greek and Roman Stoics said we shouldn't let ourselves feel anger. Even the feeling is inappropriate. It's destructive at worst and useless at best. We can train ourselves not to get upset. Aristotle was more lenient. He said it's okay to let ourselves feel angry as long as we don't act on it. I think we have both ideas floating around in our life today. So if you've ever said something like, I'm sorry, I got angry, that's like purely Stoic. Even if you don't know it, it's insinuating that you could have stopped yourself from feeling something. And that's a Stoic idea that we can indeed stop ourselves. If you've ever said something like, I'm sorry, I yelled at you when I was angry, that's more Aristotelian because you're saying, yeah, maybe it's okay that I got angry, but I shouldn't have yelled at you. It was the expression that was the problem, not the feeling of the thing. So that's in the light way of seeing anger. That's our education about anger. So if that sounds familiar, you're just a normal person who lives in our world. But anger in the dark looks different. Audre Lorde said all women have an arsenal of anger that's just waiting for us to tap into. She says we can use anger to excavate honesty, to get to the heart of injustice, instead of assuming that there's something wrong with us for letting ourselves get angry. If we diffuse our anger on a punching bag, for example, she might think that's just a waste of a perfectly dark mood. Maria Lugones also sees anger differently from the ancients. She said that anger is sometimes clear-headed. She also says there's many angers and they're not the same. We should be more accurate when naming our angers. Certain kinds of anger she even calls self-care. Anger can be a way of staying on our own side and not letting someone else gaslight us into thinking we're ugly or crazy or irrational. Women have been called, unladylike for being angry. And that's something that these women, including bell hooks, really want us to think about differently. So let's not automatically turn against our anger. Between Lorde and Lugones, anger is self-care, it's information, it's useful, it's clear-headed, almost the opposite of the way that the ancients talked about it. So in the light, anger looks poisonous, and the answer is to get rid of it. In the dark, anger looks like information, and the answer is to listen to it. Then I use the word dolor for sadness because dolor in Spanish connotes like physical pain, emotional pain, like it can kind of encompass a lot of different pains in one. So I see kids on my son's baseball team, they are told not to cry. Why is that? Why in 2023 are we still telling little boys not to cry? So I think the Epicureans taught that a happy life consisted of maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. Now, some people hate on hedonism because of greediness, or we shouldn't have that much pleasure. They focus on the pleasure side. I don't mind that as much, but I think that the idea that we're supposed to minimize our pain, that's the way to happiness, is mistaken. So their idea is we should try to feel as little emotional pain as we can, like what some Buddhists call destructive emotions, worry, sadness, anger, hatred. Sometimes they're even called toxic emotions. Positive psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy also portray happiness and sadness as opposites. And I give an example in the book that's too long to go into, but you can ask me about it in the Q&A if you want. It's the Jody story. In the light, emotional pain looks broken, unhealthy, wrong. Even just a bad mood sometimes looks entitled or inappropriate or deficient. And you can sort of ask yourself if you've ever felt like that. But when we're in pain, Miguel de Unamuno helps me to see sadness in the dark. His life was very dark. He lost a child when he was 6, and he suffered a lot more. He lived in the dark and was constantly defending it against people who would say that you should keep your suffering private. Sadness, he said, could draw people together. People connect better when they're sad than when they're happy. You have a genuine opportunity when you're sad, unlike all the moments of life when we're pretending we're fine and we just don't find each other because we're, I think, often emotionally dishonest because we either sense that the other person doesn't want to hear it or we're too kind of ashamed to want to talk about it. And so we miss a lot of the connection that we can get from being sad. Sadness helps us also see other people better. When you suffer, Unamuno says that you see suffering souls. Stephen Colbert said something similar. If you've seen the interview with Anderson Cooper, Colbert was talking about losing his father and brothers as a young child. And he said that still he can spot suffering people even today and that he feels a connection with them. So in the light, sadness looks like brokenness or a failure to be happy. But in the dark, sadness looks like potential connection. Next is grief. Grief is a rough one. When you grieve, you make people around you uncomfortable. This explains why grievers hide their grief. So ask yourself, have I ever hidden my feelings for the benefit of other people? This comes from the idea that my pain is a burden and I should not inflict my pain on somebody else. So Cicero said that grief is optional because he witnessed a soldier on the battlefield not cry after losing a child. He said you should never indulge your grief. You should get over the death of your loved ones as quickly as possible with the help of busyness and distraction in the way of poetry and philosophy. So in a light like this, grief looks broken and womanish. Some psychiatrists today think that grief is like depression, so there are trials for grief medication going on since 2010. Grief is starting to look like a mental illness, and it is diagnosable. And there's just a lot of horror stories of what people tell grievers to try to help them into the light. Like they definitely often plunge people worse into the dark because they leave them alone. And this is one thing I would love to talk about later. In the dark, there's just a lot of people who don't want to call it sick. There's a lot of people who sit in darkness of grief and defend it. C.S. Lewis was one, but he wrote a book on the death of his wife, how it shattered his faith. And he was ashamed. He was British. And he was kind of brought up in that very private British culture. But he wrote the book anyway. He was vulnerable and never let himself burn it. He never kept it in a drawer. And I think he really wanted to help people. So in the light, grief looks like something we need to get over. In the dark, grief looks like deep love. Megan Devine is an amazing grief expert who lost her partner. And she says, grief isn't a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be tended. You can read her book. It's called It's Okay That You're Not Okay. It's a really amazing book, especially if you're going through grief or if you know someone going through grief. That's an amazing book. So depression, how do we talk about it? It's a mental illness that more women suffer from than men, 2 times as many women. People I know feel ashamed of having a depression diagnosis and don't generally like to talk about it. That means that if I suffer from depression, I also likely suffer from shame. In the light, depression used to look like sin. And in some places still does. It looks like weakness or a personal failure. Why don't you just get out of bed? You're so lazy. But I would say that from my sort of experience and research, probably it's gone more from weakness to illness, like alcoholism. Like, oh, it's not your fault. You're sick. And even though people don't see it as a depressed person's fault, they still look broken. Psychologists like Peter Kramer have a zero tolerance policy on depression, and they write books saying that our goal should be to eradicate it completely. Gloria Anzaldúa was a Chicana philosopher from Hargill, Texas, right near where I teach. She went to the school that I teach at, the university. 6th-generation Mexican-American. It was when she was around 40 that people started talking about depression as a chemical imbalance. Prozac came out in 1987, which is when she published her huge book called Borderlands, La Frontera. So Anzaldúa didn't use the brain disease talk a lot. Instead, she used the Aztec goddess Coatlicue to describe her dark mood. The weeks she spent in a depressive episode, when she stopped washing dishes and stopped seeing people, and mostly slept and read in the dark. She called it being in the stony arms of Coatlicue. Coatlicue is the mother goddess with snakes for heads made of stone. Ansaldúa hated it, but she always came out of this state with new knowledge. And the idea in the book isn't to start to get people to call depression Coatlicue state. It's to investigate the metaphors we use. Like, how do we talk about depression in the society? Is there a more helpful metaphor to use than mental illness, or alongside, right? I don't even need to eliminate any of the language we already have, but I would like to infiltrate or populate our vocabulary with metaphors that make depression something other than just the thing that keeps me from perfection, right? The thing that I'm ashamed of, the thing that I would cut myself if I could get rid of it. Is there any way to feel less bad by using better language? So there was a book in the 90s called, I think it was the 80s, I can't remember, Plato, Not Prozac. And that really pitted philosophy against Western medicine, right? Like, just the title is so good because you understand like what the book is trying to do. And I don't think we need to do that. Like, I would be really happy if my book were retitled like Plato and Prozac. So this chapter and the following one especially are not anti-medicine or not anti-therapy for sure, because I think there's a way in which both can live together. You can have the medical talk of mental illness, right? And the diagnoses, and they're very important to be able to get access to that healthcare. Like, Ansaldúa had no access to healthcare. She didn't have health insurance. She was a writer. And so she would have if she could have, I think, right? So I don't think that there's a war between them, but I do think that if we can think of better words as a society to talk about these things alongside those that kind of make us feel or look broken or less than whole, you know. So toward the end of her life, Ansaldúa described her depression as a stage in a 7-stage process that she called conocimiento. It's a deep kind of knowing that usually begins with an existential earthquake. So the dark was very much part of Ansaldúa's process. She never trusted the light because she knew the story of Huitzilopochtli. He was the sun god who decapitated his sister and threw her head into the sky. Now, Coyolxauhqui sits as the moon goddess and as Ansaldúa's guide. She prefers the light of the moon to the sun and night to day, so she can help us appreciate the night. In the light, depression looks like a sign that there's something wrong with you. In the dark, depression is a sign that you are, in her words, excruciatingly alive to the world. This is the last chapter in the book. It's on anxiety, which has long been called a neurosis, disorder, illness, condition. It's the #1 mental illness in America, and 30% of Americans suffer from clinical anxiety, and it's the #1 among college students, which is why it's very important to me to think about it and talk about it. So in ancient Greece and Rome, anxiety was considered a case of bad reasoning. You're making up horrible stories about what will happen. You're being irrational. Cognitive behavioral therapy similarly focuses on the stories we tell ourselves, cognitive distortions, etc. But in the ancient times, anxiety was also considered medical. Hippocrates took note of a man who got anxious when he heard a certain flute player. If the flute person played at night, during the day, it was fine. But if he played at night, the man would get really anxious. And Hippocrates called it a medical condition, one that affects the body and the mind, not just the mind. So if anxiety is physical and psychological, who do we call upon to treat it? Philosophers used to be the doctors of the soul, according to Cicero. Freud thought psychologists were best equipped to treat the anxious housewife. But today, a lot of that work goes to psychiatrists. If it's medical, then there's something wrong with your brain. I call upon Søren Kierkegaard to help me see in the dark of anxiety. He was really anxious, and he blamed anxiety for calling off his wedding engagement with a young and a beautiful woman who he never stopped loving. Like, it's the most beautiful love story in all of philosophy. He didn't want to condemn her to a life filled with his anxiety and depression, so he let her go. But still, Kierkegaard believed that anxiety makes us human. It's not reason like Aristotle thought, or storytelling, or art, or laughter. Kierkegaard thought anxiety makes us superior to animals and angels. Anyone who's not capable of getting anxious, he thought, is not fully human. That's his starting point. Very different from the disorder model. For some of us, anxiety is debilitating. Medication helps. Does it get rid of it? No. But how about getting anxiety to a manageable volume? I know for me, when it's loudest and I can't think about anything else, That's the time to try to get the volume down so that you can actually deal with whatever it is, so you can actually listen to it. So that's Kierkegaard's advice to us. Just like Audre Lorde with anger, Kierkegaard's advice is to listen to anxiety. Treat anxiety as a teacher. It's trying to tell us something about our world or ourselves. It's right. We just don't know about what. If anxiety is a fire alarm, we need to listen to it. In the dark, we can see that anxious people are paying attention, like Glennon Doyle said. Let's start worrying about non-anxious people. Who isn't anxious in today's day and age? The existentialists after Kierkegaard believe that we avoid anxiety because we're trying to avoid our humanity. They call it fleeing from death. Like we'll scrub the toilet and wash the windows only in order not to think about our own death or the death of our loved ones. But the existential lesson is that death is part of life. There are fires out there, so if we're keen enough to hear it, we can do something about it. Maybe our anxiety is misguided, but it's not completely wrong. Let's try on the idea that anxious people are right. In the light, anxiety is a sign that you're broken. In the dark, anxiety is a sign that you're emotionally intelligent. I still love self-help. I still love Aristotle and the Stoics, but I want to mold our society to a more human shape. I want to change the way we treat each other. That's why this book isn't just self-help. If it were, it would be giving you advice for how to stay on your own side. And I hope it does that. I want the book to help you feel better about feeling bad. But I also hope that you look around and start to call out emotional injustice. It's not you who's broken, it's the world that's broken. So next time when something's wrong, instead of looking inside for how it's my fault, that I'm telling myself a bad story, maybe we'll start getting critical about an emotionally anemic world that we live in, a nyctophobic society that's scared of the dark. The mission of night vision is to put dark moods under a dimmer light where we won't show up looking broken, just human. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for sharing the overview. I really enjoyed looking at how we could reframe dark moods or reframe the darkness in each various mood that you went through. For those in our audience who are joining live, just a quick reminder that we will be taking Q&As if you have them, so you can put them in the chat. But for now, Mariana, I have a few questions for you. So I mentioned at the beginning that so many parts of your book resonated with me. And namely, in the introduction, you pose a question to the reader where you said, what if truth, beauty, and goodness reside not only in the light, but in the darkness? And I actually read your book last week on the couch as I was recovering from knee surgery, which has been a dark time for me. And that question really stuck with me. And I had the chance to reflect and look at my current state and experience and think about what I might be able to gain from the place that I'm in and what goodness could come out of this space. So I'd love to hear an example from your own personal life of when you've experienced truth, goodness, or beauty, or all of the above in your own dark time.
Yeah, I mean, this book released, the book came out last week, and it couldn't be at a more bizarre time in both a good and a bad way. So on the same day as my book was released, my mom, who's 84, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And now she's living in my house, and she's on hospice now, right? So it's like life is so real. Life is so brutal. And we are living in it, right? Like all I'm doing is living in it, right? Living with it. And it is largely terrible, right? Like a lot of it is just racking. And at the same time, there's a lot of beauty in it. And there's certainly a lot of truth. Like what I really love about publishing this book, and I'm so glad I didn't write any other book, is because I don't have to smile. I don't need to give that false impression of who I am or what I'm doing, or I'm so excited to be here. Like I don't have to do any of that. I can say, oh yeah, life's really hard right now. And also it's really cool that I wrote this book, and it's really cool that you're interviewing me. Like, I think there's so much of what Susan Cain is calling bittersweet. Like, I love like the mix of like, yeah, it's really hard, but it's also, there's a lot of beauty in it because there's just a lot of tender moments between me and my mom, and just like, and a real acknowledgement of death and like a real understanding of finality can bring about, yeah, emotional honesty and beauty and truth. I think it's the most true thing there is. I think that so much of the time we're being dishonest because we feel like the world, you know, can't really handle our darkness. And so I love to be able to come out and just be my full self and be like, yeah, this is going on and this is really sad, but it doesn't mean that I'm also not laughing. Like we had a few days ago, we were just cracking up laughing, right? So it's both. And I think if we could embrace the both, we would all feel, or those of us who feel sort of bombarded by the light could feel just a little bit of shade. Like, yes, like we can rest a little bit when we don't have to be faking it all the time.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And this is a related point. You spoke a little bit about the concept of dolor and suffering in your presentation. One of the stories I resonated with as well was the story of Jody, and you referenced it. So if you would be able to tell the audience a synopsis of that, I found it really powerful.
So Jody is a middle-aged woman, and she is trying to get back in the workforce after having taken 10 years out to raise her kids. And she tries, you know, she's worried one night sitting at the dinner table, and she's with her husband and kid, and she says, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a job. Who's going to want me after all this time? You know, I'm feeling insecure, blah, blah, blah. And the husband, we'll just focus on the husband, was raised in our society. This is a true story. The husband's raised in our society. So he's just like, no, like, you can't have that attitude. Like, what do you mean you're not going to make it? You're wonderful. You have so many good qualities. Anyone would be lucky to have you. And he's being so sweet, if you look at it one way, that he's really trying to counter her negativity with positivity. And a lot of times that's what we're taught. If someone's down, bring them up. Tell her what she's good at, right? So he would spitball and he would say, let's make a list of all your qualities. And she just kept being like, yeah, no, I don't really want to do that. I just don't think anyone's going to hire me. So, I mean, the snippet of the story is so short. It's from a book called The Optimistic Child by Martin Seligman, who anyone in the mental health field will have read and really appreciates, because he's making the argument. He's the founder of positive psychology. So even if you don't know anything about him, he's a super, super big deal. And what he's saying, he reads that story, right? He writes that story and he says, Jody insists on being negative. She's a brooding pessimist. And bravo to the husband for countering her negativity with positivity. And she's just refusing to think that she could get a job. And she's going to pass her pessimism on to her kids who are watching. So I just read this story a few years ago and I was like, huh? What? Like you think the husband's doing a good job? So when I read the story, I was like, why doesn't this dude listen? Why doesn't he hear her, that she is saying, I am worried about this. I'm scared. I don't know. Like, I am insecure, right? She's feeling all these things. That's why I call it dolor. It's anxiety, but it's also sadness. It's also, he's making her quite lonely because he doesn't understand and he just wants her to feel better. And so I think about the story in the book and I think, well, okay, so then she now has to feel guilty for not being happier because she's not pleasing him, right? She should be like, oh, I'm going to get a better attitude. And if in our country, we really believe that if you have the right attitude, anyone can do anything, then she's obviously doing something wrong, right? Whereas I think that man is full of wishful thinking. I don't know. He's never been a middle-aged woman out of work for 10 years trying to get back into the work world, as though this work world is not sexist and full of ageist practices, right? So I think she's right. I actually think she's being more logical and rational. And I think he is like subject to some crazy wishful thinking and also just like not listening. So I think he's being rather tone deaf. And if you've ever experienced that, that's what it is, right? It's to be denied. It's for someone else to make you feel bad, even though you feel like you're being realistic. Someone else is like, well, with that attitude, you're never going to get better. And honestly, that's what someone told my mom, like, oh, you're never going to fight your cancer if you don't have the right attitude. And I think, what a way to hurt a person. And it is so unintentional, right? I feel bad. Like the consolers, they're trying to do the right thing. They mean well. We've been taught badly. It's not our fault. We've been taught badly. But wow, can you make someone feel worse about pain when you could be there making them feel better? And so I imagine the rest of the story, if I could do it with Miguel de Unamuno, who's, you know, from the second chapter. And he would just say, what if he just sat with her? What if he just sat and said, tell me more? Like, I'd like to hear more about your worries. You know, is it this? Is it that? Do you regret it? And then they start communicating and connecting. And then maybe he can say, oh, I also feel bad because I'm middle-aged. And they could commune and they could have a beautiful kind of connection if he could just stop trying to like deny her negativity. But if he could sort of join her and say, like, I'm going to put the flashlights down and I'm just going to come in with you and like let you talk about darkness if you want to. And then maybe I can relate to it. So I just find it a beautiful like reimagining of the story. If we can think about like what not to do and then what could we do to, you know, when our loved ones are in a kind of a dark place.
Exactly. And I originally was thinking about this story and resonating from Jodi's point of view, but now I'm thinking about how I can best support my family or friends in their times of suffering by giving them the space they need and what they might actually need at the time, and ensure that they're not feeling shame or hiding their darkness, so to speak. So switching gears a bit, what do you find that people get wrong most about your position on darkness and sitting through dark times?
I think the idea that we're only supposed to be in the dark, like, oh, are you now advocating we should just go back in the cave? I use this cave metaphor from Plato, but you know, now it's just all dark. And I'm like, no, I think what I'm trying to get rid of is the black and white, right? I'm trying to say we've been part of this dichotomy for 2,500 years where light is good and dark is bad. I don't think we're going to get past it without doing a little bit of the flip of that, without acknowledging darkness, without saying like we are not broken. Like this is a very normal part of human existence. And so, but I want my book to be obsolete. I want it to stop. I want the world to change such that people would read it and be like, that's not the world. What do you mean? I see people apologizing in public. I mean, not apologizing for crying, right? Crying in public and not saying, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, right? Like when I see like people do that en masse, I'll be like, oh, wow, we are actually in a different world. So I don't want to just go like all dark or something like that. I want to go in and out. I just want more emotional flexibility among the people surrounding us and in our society. I want to take down all the posters that say choose happy and stay positive always, you know? But it's not because I just want to like linger in the darkness forever. I eventually want to move beyond both dark and light and just have colors, different colors of things, right? Like why do we have to put down this side of us that's just as much human as our joyful side?
I love the term emotional flexibility. I think that really gets at you know, the balance between the two, and people seeing not only times that can be light, but the darkness, and that it's not all bad, so to speak.
And Susan David does a great job, right? Susan David is like the expert on emotional agility, and she's talking about it from the first person point of view. I think I'm talking more like our society. I want our society to be more emotionally agile or emotionally flexible, but I think it's cool to have both. Like we also to be more of that. I just don't want to blame an individual who already feels blamed or who's already suffering. I'd rather criticize a society that's kind of emotionally inept. Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Okay, so with that, I would love to turn to audience questions and give us a chance to go through the Q&As. So it looks like we are ready for our first one. So Jenna is stating, I really love your perspective in humanizing the range of emotions. I notice sadness or anxiety are often accompanied by shame at feeling those things. How do you work to get over that?
So I like to think of my book as like self-help without homework. Because I think a person who's already suffering, who's already, let's say, feeling sad or anxious, the last thing I want to say was, well, you need to do these 5 steps. This is what you're not doing. That's why you feel shame. I actually want to lift the shame off of you by recognition. And I have found that this has happened with my students. Just listening to what my book is about or even reading parts of my book, they say, whoa, I feel better because you haven't made me feel like I'm doing it to myself. You have actually made me feel valid and validated. And that makes me feel less ashamed. So I want to kind of like take the pressure off of individuals. And I want to say like, here, look, like I'm going to change the lens. It's not you. Let's change the lens and show you why you feel so ashamed. So there's nothing that you have to do extra. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we have our next question. From Simone, sometimes I find myself falling into toxic positivity when trying to make someone in my life feel better. How do I stop myself from doing this? It's not necessarily intentional.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to do something nice, right? You love them, and this is fine. Like, I think what most people would say is you're doing a great job, and it's their refusal to accept your pummeling them with positivity. And the difference is that I would say, yeah, you are doing it. It's normal, and try not to do it, right? Like, just try to get comfortable with the dark. It might have to do with you getting comfortable with your own mood or your own feelings, or like tapping into them. Sometimes we want to run away because we don't want to go there, because someone else is like making us feel things that we don't want to feel. But if you think about, Unamuno gave us this thing of two instruments, strings. When one strings begin vibrating, the other ones do too. And so think of it as like a good thing. They're trying to touch you. They're trying to reach you. And if you can like hold it and accept it and say, yes, me too, then that could be more loving than either running away or trying to just sort of cheer them up. Just, it's not the way to the world. You do not have to cheer up people, because most of the time it backfires anyway. You're just there to be with them.
That's really powerful. And I think one final question that we have time for before we wrap up. So from Morgan, I've always been attracted dark for 50 plus years. For example, my favorite books are Slaughterhouse-Five, 1984, anything Dostoevsky, but I imbibe alone. How do I ever bring others into this beautiful world?
I don't know. I think like one way is if you want to be vulnerable. Like, I also want to defend a person's right to be private. Like, you don't have to, as an individual, tell other people about your suffering, especially if you don't trust them. Like, you get to do whatever you want to do in terms of telling other people. But I would say that it does really make a difference if you kind of put yourself a little bit on the line, and you can decide what's safe, what isn't safe. Then other people might be like, oh, you're a safe one. Like, I have a lot of, people who tell me, oh, I used to say nothing, and this person would say, wow, you're the only person who really understands me. So I think, oh yeah, like, be the person who doesn't mess it up. Be the only ears for the person who is suffering, that they say, oh, I can't talk to anyone else like this, because they try to cheer me up. So it's really about being a better, like lover of other human beings, so that they feel comfortable coming to you. And sometimes that requires us being vulnerable ourselves.
Yeah, the piece about vulnerability and being an ally, I think people frequently talk about it in the positive manner, but it's just as important when thinking about the darkness as well. So we actually do have time for two more bonus questions. From Effie asked, it can be hard to take depression seriously and seek the help you need without sorry, this natural condition. Any tips? Haven't had
Yeah, I think depression is the hardest one to write about, to talk about, because it is so serious. And if you want like an amazing book on depression alone, it's called The Noonday Demon by Andrew Solomon. It's amazing. So I think what you're asking is, it's hard to take it seriously within yourself. Like, am I really clinically depressed? Am I not? That kind of thing. And so I really don't have advice for like an individual, because I'm trying not to give you homework or advice. I'm just trying to open the world up for you. I'm trying to open the world up for you to be able to say things like, today I feel really bad. And for people not to be like, oh my God, like it's some huge emergency. Like, let's just have more tolerance for what I would consider like ordinary levels of sadness and darkness and depression and things. And then I think like, there's always room for therapy and medication, and right, those things don't have to go out the window. But I think that part of what sort of pushes us into feeling like weirdos, like my students tend to feel like total weirdos, is that there's no tolerance. Like, if the whole thing is 100% keep calm and carry on, then any amount of it looks pathological. So I would say within yourself to sort of like just think about how much it's affecting your life. Like, are you able to work? And like that kind of thing. So that's like a little advice. I don't have much advice. Mostly I want to fix the world for you so that it will be more clear. You'd be on a sort of level playing field, rather than this one where it sort of makes everything look like clinical depression.
Mm-hmm. And our last question is related. So Jack says, thanks, Mariana, for the talk. If we think it's okay not to be okay, how should we get out of the not okay status? Do we just live with it and let it go through time naturally?
I mean, that's a hard question because I don't know how not okay you are, right? Like, I definitely support that's the title of Megan Devine's book. It's okay that you're not okay. But she also puts living in a world that doesn't understand grief, right? So it's really that also that portion of it's much of it is the world we live in. So how do we know? I mean, I think, yeah, there's going to be what I would like to see is some sort of emotional revolution in our country where if we can like dim the lights a bit so that we can all express more. Like if Instagram, let's just pretend it's Instagram. And if it was full of like mediocre days and some bad days and some good days, then we might be able to gauge how we're doing compared to other people and be like, oh, yeah, this is actually normal. But currently, you know, the more success you have, it's almost the harder you're on yourself because you're saying, well, I should be so happy and I have everything in the world and I'm so blessed and all this stuff because there's just the expectation that we're supposed to be like happy out of our minds. So I think it will depend on how not okay you are. But again, we're in a rigged game because everyone else is sort of pretending to be probably more okay than they are. And I just think all of us, like as an existentialist, I think we're all just quaking in our shoes. I think we're all afraid of death. I think we're all just like worried from day to day. You know, I think the real, like if we could get an honest assessment of how we're doing, I think it wouldn't look very good. But I think that's also normal. I think we're just prone to think it's supposed to be better than it is.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I wanted to thank you so much, not only for sharing the overview of your book, but for taking the time to answer the questions. I think this discussion has been incredibly valuable, and Talks at Google has been very lucky to have you. Personally, what I've learned from you feels very empowering, and not only thinking about my own moods, but also on the societal level, as you said, and thinking about my work in the mental health and well-being space. So,
Well,
thank you
I
so much
appreciate
for your
it
time.
so much. Thank you.